All right, President Trump's laser focused on cracking down on illegal immigration. I'm sure you've heard that before. It was a hallmark of his campaign, making America safe again. In fact, border crossings are down. Yet, a new report suggests he sent fewer Mexicans back to their country between January and December of this year compared to President Obama did during the same time in 2016. Now, President Trump, as you know, is working hard at keeping Mexicans from crossing over illegally in the first place. He hinted last week he'll make a trip soon to our southern border over to San Diego to look at prototypes for his proposed wall. He's going to ultimately make the choice. They're going to be about 30 feet high. And then we'll see if they're going to do something below because we've got a little tunnel problem. Kennedy,
yes.
What does this study say to you that we've actually had less Mexican apprehensions in 2017 than 2016?
Well, you also had fewer illegal border crossings. So the president did some very good messaging. It was very effective, good marketing when he was running for president, in that, fewer people came into this country illegally. And also it shows that the president has a much bigger heart than President Obama, who was absolutely awful about deporting people and ripping families apart. And it's laughable that he reached out to the Latino community the way he did, because he was incredibly heartless with his deportations. And President Trump has actually softened there and looked for other ways to try and solve the immigration crises we face in this country.
Marie, it turns out I had a chance to go down to the border 2 weeks ago, and they do think the beginning of the wall will be built in the Rio Grande Valley sector area, where it is indeed the worst. But the word came out in the first half of the year that we're cracking down, and it slowed down. In the second half of the year, when we didn't do anything policy-wise because Congress couldn't get their act together, it picked up again. And then you have these numbers overall. What does it tell you?
Well, I think we will see how big President Trump's heart is as we deal with DACA in the new year. I mean, as we look at 2018, that's the biggest immigration fight we're going to have, I think, pretty early on. The numbers are interesting. I'm not sure exactly what to make of them. I think fewer people are coming here. They've arrested more immigrants, but they have deported fewer back to Mexico. So I think we'll see. When it comes to the wall, though, I do not predict that President Trump will be able to build a wall across the entire border. I think he will find places where he can put up a structure so he can go take a photo with it, say he's kept his promise. Because in some of these places, I think the landowners aren't going to want to give up their land. They very much don't want the government coming in some of these places and taking their land to build a wall.
Long, costly, eminent domain battle.
Exactly. This is going to be an eminent domain battle that I don't think everyone is focused on enough.
Why wouldn't a property owner want a wall? You put the wall up there. I mean, they don't want people illegal crossings on their property, right?
But if you go back, Texas especially, this is an issue because there are families who were actually property owners and landowners before Texas became a state and part of the United States of America. And so the culture there is a little bit different in terms of how they deal with the issue. However, that does not mean that they don't want border security and that they don't want Border Patrol to be on their property, working with Border Patrol to make sure that people aren't crossing back and forth. But that doesn't necessarily mean they want their ranches divided by a big wall. So there is going to be a very big battle there. In terms of the numbers, not all illegal immigrants in this country are Mexicans. In fact, only 50% of them are. The rest are other than Mexican. And one of the big problems that we have, too, is visa overstays. There are 54 million people who come into the country every year. 700,000 of them tend to stay behind.
That's absolutely
Interior enforcement is an issue. And under Obama, he was called the deporter-in-chief. But the way that they measured that number was to catch people at the border and immediately deport them. And they counted that as a deportation. That's not going into communities and rounding people up and deporting them. They were counting people coming across, turning themselves into Border Patrol, and then getting kicked back out as a deportation. And that's why that number was so high.
Well, that's a great point. And I think this, Tom, one thing is also clear. It's not just Mexicans. In fact, Central America and South America, depending on where the poorest areas are, Mexico's going, you can keep going. If you can come in as long as
they don't want them to stay there.
You keep going.
Yes, that's
and so it's really not Mexico right now that is the problem. That's the sense among the Border Patrol. But keep in mind, too, the fear of drugs, fentanyl in particular, coming across our southern border is very real. They think that is picking up, too.
Yeah, well, the fact that you have fewer people being deported should be celebrated. The headlines in the paper, Trump sends home fewer Mexicans despite deportation talk. Another headline, Donald Trump deporting fewer people, and then it says rhetoric versus reality.
As if he was just targeting Mexicans for deportation.
Yes, and the fact that it's empty talk. It's not empty talk.
No.
If your tough talk makes fewer people come across the border, the headline should be Trump immigration policy working.
Right. No, absolutely. The other thing that they're working on, I believe it's going to happen in January, Kennedy, they're going to start talking about if they're going to come together on anything, it's going to be immigration.
Yeah.
Evidently, there's a bipartisan committee in the Senate meeting right now that are going to be attacking chain migration because I believe there's sentiment on both sides to attack it. The lottery as well, and DACA, you mix it in with border security. Could this be our first joint legislation since the early 20s?
Yeah, it's interesting because people's feelings about immigration tend to evolve with some of the facts, reality, and news that happens. And, you know, whether it's Kate Steinle's death, which certainly galvanized on the right, or some of the terror incidents, which, you know, reach across party lines, and people start to go, well, I'm wondering about the kind of people that are in my community, and how do we keep the country safer while still attracting the very best people in the world to come and work at businesses and help take care of families and participate in the economy. I mean, that's ultimately what you want. So the question is, how do we fix immigration to keep bad people out without compromising our civil liberties?
Marie,
and that's a big goal. It's the ultimate goal. But I think actually Republicans and Democrats are much closer on that because people essentially want the same thing. They want the country to be safe. They want the best and brightest people here. And they realize that the system is broken on several ends. You know, visas and visa overstays that Katie talked about. We have to fix the visa system. And Democrats have to live up to the promises that they made on border security 11 years ago.
Marie, tell me where the no-go zone is. And I believe I have not heard it yet, except for build the wall, which Senator Schumer does not want to give President Trump this victory. He might give in, but I have not heard him object to chain migration. And the lottery system being reexamined. So, and DACA, of course, the president said, listen, I'm kind of into getting this done by March. So do you think that they're actually, we might be 2/3 of the way there, or am I dreaming?
No, I think we actually, you're wide awake. You're not totally dreaming. I think we might be close. Jeff Flake tweeted that there will be a DACA bipartisan bill come to the Senate floor after the new year. I think that was something he got in exchange for being a yes on tax reform or as part of a conversation. Chuck Schumer was part of the Gang of Eight who talked about ending chain migration. This is something that Democrats are absolutely open to talking about. If that's the package that gets put together earlier in the new year, because the closer you get to November, the harder it becomes. If we can do that, I absolutely think we can get a bipartisan agreement.
I think she's right. I think if you are able to tackle DACA and the Dreamers and take care of things like chain migration and the lottery system, and you don't fold amnesty into it, then
But that's going to be a really big challenge because the details of DACA are going to be hard to work out. What is the threshold in terms of the timing for when you were brought here, and do you get to stay? 66% of the illegal immigrants in this country have been here for more than 10 years, which means the rest of them have only been here for 5. That's a lot of people who are going to be looking for some kind of form of amnesty, and it ultimately doesn't solve the question of what do we do with the people who are here, because they're not all dreamers. And let's not forget that Barack Obama's dreamer policy caused an influx of unaccompanied minors, caused a huge crisis, and that is a potential to happen again if they aren't careful about the way that they debate the legislation.
Tom, you're in a tough spot because you were going to use chain migration to bring more shalloos across the border. And now you got it. Now you realize public sentiment and this table has turned against you. What happens to the other shalloos?
Shalloos are going to do just fine because they do have merits.
Oh, they do?
Yes.
You bring something to the table.
You change chain migration. We don't need chain migration.
Right.
The Shalloos can come here because they're highly skilled.
All right, fine.
They got mad skills.
That's the criteria.
Yes.
And plus you can sing and dance.
Triple threat.
That's absolutely true. I think it's true in the big picture. This is the one thing I fear because I think we're all tired of this. Conservatives will say, you better not do a deal on DACA. And Democrats said, you can't do a deal with Trump. We got the Republicans on their back. If you let Trump stand up and look like a consolidator, a deal maker, there goes the midterm elections.
But I think we're confident enough in what we're running on. We need DACA. And actually, to Kennedy's point, the fact that so many Republicans have come out in support of DACA and getting it fixed and done is stunning.
Not alone.
No, not alone. But is such a sea change from where we were even a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That's why I think this is going to get this done. These 800,000 dreamers, I do think both sides of the aisle want to find a compromise so they don't all get kicked out.
Can I just say, though, that the legal immigration system in this country is also severely broken. Legal, right. And I believe it is unfair that we are focusing on the illegal immigration reform of this problem before we are focusing on the legal reform, because people wait 5, 10, 15 years to come to this country legally.
Yeah, because
they pay thousands of dollars, and they're currently using the fees that the legal immigrants are paying for DACA and the Dreamers that were here before. That is the money that was used under Obama, and that's how he got away with doing it and not going through Congress. And so I do think we have to rethink our priorities. DACA is one that a lot of people can agree on, but there are bigger immigration problems with putting Americans first that the president campaigned on that I think should be kept first.
I'm a part of the soccer community, which prides itself on internationals. And they are kind of angry at the whole talk of DACA because they go through the green card system for the most part. And they're waiting their 10 years, paying their fees, and they'll say, wait a second, what about us?
But there's a difference. And this is where I give people credit for having a more subtle and nuanced conversation about immigration, because they realize it's really heartless to deport people if this is the only home they've ever known. And that's the basis for the argument for protecting Dreamers. But also, at the same time, having said that, then you don't create the influx. You kind of close the door. And that's when you fix the immigration system. And I don't think you shut down the number of visas. I think you do a better job of vetting people and allow people in who are good people who are going to work hard. What is the metric for that? How do you vet for that? I don't know. I don't know if anyone has the answer.
Well, there's people that do this every day.
This is another big question, too. You look at DACA and the Dreamers, right? And we talk about not breaking up families. Well, guess what? Dreamers all have families. And if their parents are illegal immigrants, which many of them are, because ICE has delivered children to their parents in this country, have been living here illegally for years, what do you do with their family? Do they automatically get amnesty? Do they get to stay? What is their status? And so that's a very tough question, because you can argue if you pass through DACA, the entire family by default gets to stay because we're not a heartless country that deports and breaks up families. And that is something that's difficult to deal with, because that is amnesty for everybody.
Do you guys know what I'm doing right now?
What?
I'm crossing at the A block. We have just done a great job starting the show.
Really
It
good.
is now done. And all the pressure
You would
goes...
make such a good teacher.
Thank you very much.
I would.
And all the pressure is about to go on your shoulders, young lady, to match that, okay?